Today we're talking and we're battling the very first hot topic that we introduced part of this discussion last year on anxiety, depression, and mental illness. It is a hot topic in our culture. It's a hot topic really in the church because not a lot of churches, not a lot of pastors, not a lot of people are talking about this hot topic in the church. We've kind of made it taboo, and it's kind of one of these things that we've kind of left for the culture and society to decide and tell us what it is and what our response should be. And come on, I believe that if we believe that Jesus is the hope of the world, then He is still the hope for all things in Jesus' name. And you just need to know right up front that I got a lot of anxiety just preparing for this message in my office. Because I'm not a counselor. Amen. I'm telling myself this right now. You're just helping me. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a pastor. I'm a pastor. And if mental health, if you're here, and we're going to soon discover there's probably a lot of us here in the room, mental health is a very, very complex issue. It's not simple to solve. It's not easy to just blanket statement anxiety and depression and mental illness. It's a very complex issue. And for some of us in the room, there's going to be not just one thing that we need to do that's going to help us. It's probably several things that we need to start implementing in our life. For some, you might need a change of diet. We just get real practical right from the beginning. You just need to change. It's amazing how your physical health tweaks and messes with your mental health. So for some of us, we might need to change our diet, and because we might need to change our diet, we might need to go see a dietitian. For others of us, we might be facing a real chemical imbalance, something messed up, something that's not working like it should. So we probably need to go see a doctor, like a real doctor. He's got a degree on the wall, pay a lot of money for it, really smart, knows exactly maybe some things to try to test to get that thing back aligned properly. For other people, you might need to just process some things. How many know life isn't fair? How many know life can be painful? Life can be difficult. And Christianity, listen to me, is not escapism. We don't get to come to church every single Sunday and then think that we get to withdraw from the pain that this life offers. Matter of fact, Jesus said, if you're going to make no mistake, in this world, you will have trouble. You will have trouble. So we don't get to escape the things. And so if you're here and life's been hard and you've gone through painful situations and you need to process some of those things, how many know you probably need to go see a counselor? You need to, come on, it's wise to get wisdom from the wise. So you might need to process some of these things out. And I think that, again, just right from the beginning, because it's so complex, you need to know that as a pastor and really as your advocate leading this church, I would encourage you to seek out any and everything you can to get as much help as you can in dealing with anxiety, depression, and mental illness, because I'm telling you, they're nothing to be just left alone. There's serious, complex issues that are affecting more people than you think. I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a counselor, I'm a pastor, and I just happen to still believe that Jesus heals all things. That doesn't mean because you're a Christian that you will not experience mental illness, depression, or anxiety, but it does mean that when you are walking through those, you can also experience the peace, the power, and the presence of God. Maybe not to heal you, but to help you walk through it. Does that make sense? Just right from the beginning. I just have to say this because the church has gotten this wrong for so many years. I kind of grew up in a flow of church where if you struggled with mental illness, you were weak. You must not love Jesus enough. You must not have enough faith. You must not be praying enough. You're not really spiritual if you're struggling with mental illness. And I'm tired of the church labeling other people in the church, bringing division in the church by pointing fingers and saying, this is really more spiritual, or this means that you're less spiritual. So right from the beginning, I taught this last year. I almost took it out, but I just want us all to be on the same page from the very beginning, that you have to know two things as we discuss mental illness. And the first thing you have to know is it's not a sin to be sick. It's not a sin to be sick, that there's some things that, again, life happens and we walk through things. It's not a sin to be sick. I'll tell you what is a sin, I believe, is to ignore it or refuse to take helps and recovering from it. I do believe that's where we get hung up, but you need to know right from mental illness, it's not a sin. We feel bad, we label people, we say, no. It's not a sin to be sick. And your mental illness or your sickness does not have to be your identity. It's not who you are. Might be what you're going through, might be what you're experiencing right now, but that is not who you are. It's not a sin to be sick. The second thing you also have to know is it's okay. It's okay to not be okay, y'all. I know he's not really popular in church because we got all dressed up and we're supposed to be religious and we're supposed to know every answer and we're supposed to know every single verse to repel the devil, and our kids are not supposed to misbehave and supposed to be perfect little angels even though we want to kill them. You know what I'm saying? It's okay to not be okay. And the reason why it's okay to not be okay is because when you finally get to the place where you realize that I'm not okay, you're finally in the place where you're ready to receive all that God has for your life. He says, my power is made perfect in your weakness. My power is made perfect. And matter of fact, it works the best when you're able to say, I'm not okay. We can't have a conversation in church about mental illness if we're not going to open up and just acknowledge it and say, you know what, maybe I am struggling. Maybe I'm not as strong as I thought that I was. Can I just let us all know something this morning? You have issues. You have it. I have it. I'm a pastor. I do this for a living. Guess what? I have issues. Real issues. I don't get to escape either. I live in the same world that you do. I have issues. You have issues. If you're sitting there with your religious spirit thinking that you don't have an issue, that's your issue right there. We can't go nowhere until we all realize it's okay to not be okay. And we're all struggling and we all have issues. And I was doing a lot of study and reading this week on, obviously, anxiety and depression and mental illness and learning again, because this is not, I'm just trying to get as much information. I found some things out in further study that I just wanted to share with you, because I wanted to bring as much, not necessarily just information, but to really make sure that I was providing something that I knew that everybody probably in the room has experienced, is experiencing, or has been touched by someone close to them walking through these things. In all the studies that you see, there's really top 5. There's several, a top like 8, but within these top 8 of all mental illnesses in the U.S., these are the top 5 that everybody is saying is touching the majority of almost every single person in the U.S., and these disorders. And the first one is anxiety disorders. Is anybody in the room? I know I already told you it's okay to not be okay, so stop being spiritual. Stop trying to be spiritual. Anxiety disorders, excessive, persistent worry and fear about everyday and future situations. How many of you in the room, let's try to be honest, have ever been anxious? Okay. Persistent worry and fear about everyday and future situations. And it's an anxiety disorder. Here's the next one, is depressive disorders. Extreme sadness, poor concentration, sleep problems, lack of productivity, and feelings of guilt, helplessness, and hopelessness. Josh, what are you doing? Find yourself on the list. I promise you, you're on here somewhere. I know that I am. Anxiety disorders, depressive disorders. How about this next one? Eating disorders. An obsession with food, body weight, or body shape that often results in serious health consequences, most common, of course, anorexia and bulimia. Next one. Attention deficit disorder. All my parents said a good amen. And some of us adults. Attention deficit disorders, a combination of persistent problems such as difficulty sustaining attention, hyperactivity, and impulsive behavior. Here's what was shocking and one that I never ever would have thought that would ever be on the list. But all of the studies saying so many Americans refusing to get help from the disorder that they're facing, and they keep telling themselves that they're not facing, that they've actually brand new, the 2013 newest edition of all the psychiatric and all the studies on mental illness has recently published within the top 5 a brand new disorder. And this disorder is a result of what happens when you don't get help from the other disorders: substance use disorders. They've really literally defined it as a disease that affects a person's brain and or behavior that leads to an inability to control the use of a legal or illegal drug or medication. Most common in the U.S. Alcohol, opioids or painkillers, marijuana, and yeah, but it's medical. Felt like we needed just a little bit of laugh there. It was getting really heavy. Substance use disorders. I can't take the pain anymore, and I'm obviously not going to admit or reach out for help for the pain, so now I live my life coping with the pain, killing, masking. And now I already had one disorder, but now because I can't realize that it's okay to not be okay, or can't take off the mask and say, this is what's really going on. Now I have another disorder. Now I'm living, masking what's really going on. Church, I'm telling you, something has to change. Jesus did not only come to pay for your sins, he came to set you free. And he died and he went through all of that, listen, for so much more, to give you so much more than what you're currently experiencing. That your disorder, listen, does not have to stay a disorder. Why are we talking about this? Josh, this is we have to talk about this because the statistics say that 1 in 5 adults experience some type of mental illness. You can imagine in the room, guess how many of us are dealing with it. They also say that 1 in 25 adults live with a severe mental illness, and that depression, here's why we're talking about it, depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. Listen, it's not hunger, it's not poverty, it's not the lack of clean water. It's not cancer. How many of you know somebody in the room that has had in the past or currently has cancer? How many raise your hand? How many know somebody? Look at this. But if we ask the same question about depression, it would probably be half the hands, because we can't seek help for depression, because if I ask help when I'm depressed, then it means that I'm weak. But yet all the studies say that, listen, it's the leading cause of disability worldwide. And here's why you have to know that, because 90% of suicides are related to mental illness. 90%. Well, that sounds like a big number, but how many suicides are there? Just in the U.S. alone, there's 45,000 suicides Every year, not on your notes, 2017, the latest statistic that we have, in 1 year, there were over 1.4 million suicide attempts. 1.4 million. We're acting like we're not involved. This doesn't affect us. Can't talk about this. Of course, as a parent, the number one thing that got me going, and radars going off everywhere, is the statistics also say that it's the number 2 killer of young people ages 15 to 24, only followed by, ready, number 1, accidents. Accidents, number 1. Number 2, in young people, suicide. Of course, I believe with all of my heart. You just need to know, again, suicide is the permanent, irreversible attempt to solve a very temporary problem. And listen, if you don't think that Satan hates your life, if you don't think that Satan is after your kids' lives, listen, he's always been after young people. He's always been after young people. Israel wasn't even a nation yet. They were slaves, and he was killing their babies. He's always been after young. It's the future generation, and he's lying, and he's whispering things that are not true. And regardless of your mental state, or if you're anxious, or if you're depressed, or if you just feel like you can't take it anymore, listen, do not buy into the lies of the enemy. I know your situation feels hopeless, but the only cure to hopelessness is hope. And hope has a name, and his name is Jesus. He's the only cure. Yes, you got to seek help. And yes, you probably need to be on medication. And yes, you need to see a counselor. And yes to all those things, but also yes to hope. And his name is Jesus. Because if you'll get close to Jesus, he'll tell you things like this, that you don't have to die to end your pain. Yes. And you'll never hear this anywhere else. Maybe the way out is this. No. You always know that's not Jesus. Come on. He's hope. He's life. And you just, from I don't know who this is for. I don't know if this is for someone in the room, probably. I don't know if you're here and you're here representing somebody else that needs to hear this. But listen, you do not have to die to end your pain. That there's hope, there's healing, there's restoring in the name of Jesus. And you can experience it. You can experience it. If you've ever struggled with anxiety and maybe depression, mental illness, can I just relieve everybody in the room? I'm relieving myself because I've definitely battled with these things that you are in. Come on, you're in good company. You are in good company. You're in good company, number 1, because you're not alone. You're in good company, number 2, because almost every this is so encouraging to me. Almost every single person in the Bible that God used to do great things had gone through anxiety, fear, worry, depression, even severe mental illness. And listen, God used them regardless. Right. And there's so many different stories. Paul, I wanted to preach. I don't even know what I'm going to do yet. We may just stay on this topic for the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I don't know. There's just so many. Paul, his dream is to go to Rome to preach the gospel in Rome. He finally gets to Rome to preach the gospel, only to be arrested, shackled, and thrown into a dungeon. He finally arrives at his dream. Now he's in a dungeon, guarded, going to be probably executed in pins. In Philippians chapter 4, rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, do not be anxious for anything, but in all things bring your request to God with prayer and supplication. Pour out your heart to all, and the peace of God. And you're like, how in the world? Do not be anxious. Anxious for nothing? Are you serious? Do you see the life that we live? People all throughout the scriptures battling anxiety, battling fear, battling depression. I want to show you one of my favorite characters in the Bible that just had a complete mental breakdown. How many think that's a great place to start? Just sign me up next to him. Yeah, come on, if he could make the Bible, maybe there's hope for me. And maybe you've heard the story, and it's a guy by the name of Elijah. And Elijah, if you don't know who Elijah was, you need to go just read First Kings, and he shows up in chapter 17. And Elijah, he's the guy. He's the man. He's the Jay-Z of prophets. He's everybody. Everybody knows him. Everybody wants him. No, not Jay-Z. He's the Chris Stapleton of prophets. Is that? Luke, I don't know. I'll get in trouble if I go all over the place. In First Kings chapter 18, I've got to paraphrase this. Elijah, one man, he's done miracle after miracle after miracle. God has done nothing but show up in his life over and over and over again. And in chapter 18, this one man literally faces down 850 false prophets in a showdown to see who's going to be the real God. Anybody remember this story? And so they bring the fatted calf, and they pour buckets and buckets of water, and they say, you pray to your God, I'm going to pray to my God. Of course, hours go by, and the prophets of Baal and Asherah, and they can't get anything to happen, and Elijah is making fun of them. He's dogging them. He's being sarcastic. He's being rude. He's already one of my favorite characters in the Bible. He's just amazing. And then he calls down, what? Fire from heaven that comes and consumes and literally explodes his thing, and it's a mic drop moment. And what? Everybody is convinced. Everybody sees with their own eyes that Elijah's God is the one true God. Josh, amazing story. What does that have to do with me? What's interesting, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because all of these things happen. It's a miracle. The false prophets are put on the run. They're running. And one chapter later, this baller of a man just stared down 850 and was like, what? Fire. One man who stood up, 850 other men let one woman. Now, I'm not going to say that it don't take more than one, because how many times it can just take one? Hello, it don't take much. But one threat from one woman, Jezebel. All he had to do is hear one single threat from one woman right after God did all of these things. And listen, Elijah has a complete mental breakdown. He goes into a fit of anxiety, panic attack, fear. Oh my gosh, the world is falling apart. I'm not waking up tomorrow. This is the worst day. This is the worst thing. I cannot believe this is happening. I want to pick this up because I want to show you this. Because even though, listen, maybe you can identify, I sure know that I can. Even though Elijah knows that God is real, even though Elijah has experienced God, he still finds himself living and experiencing this depression. And so I want to read this account really quick, and I just want to see if we can learn from some of the mistakes that Elijah made right in the middle of his situation. It's found in 1 Kings chapter 19. This is right after this. I want you to follow along. This is what it says. Elijah was, that was 6 of you. Elijah was, thank you. Elijah was afraid. So what did he do? Fled for his life. Remember, he's not afraid because there's 1,000 people trying to kill him. There's not even anyone trying to kill him yet. They just said they wanted to. How many sometimes the thing that you're most worried about isn't what's reality, it's what you're afraid might happen.
Right. Yep. That's so
A lot of the things that we're afraid of that's causing anxiety is always a what if instead of a current reality. This hasn't even happened yet, but he's borrowing energy from the future, worrying today. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He went to Beersheba. Notice this, we're going to come back to this. A town in Judah. And he left his servant there. It goes on. Then he went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. We're not talking about someone that just comes to church on Sunday, just kind of casually follows Jesus. No, we're talking about the prophet of God, the pastor, who literally just called down fire from heaven, has done miracle after miracle after miracle, and then just like this, one situation, and now he's saying, God, would you please take my life? This is what he says. I have had enough, Lord, he said. So take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. How many of you can identify with, I have had enough? Come on. I've had enough. I've had enough with this job. I've had enough with this career. I've had enough with my kids. I've had enough in my marriage. I've had enough. I've had it up to here with my finances. I've had it up here with my relationship struggles. I've had it up to here with being lonely. I have had I've had enough. I've had enough. I want you to know that I'm dedicating. We're going to position and kind of transition here. I'm dedicating today's message. If you're anything like me and you've been in the place where you've said, I've had enough. I've had enough. I don't think I could take it. I've had enough. I've had enough cooking the same meal 964 times with not one person saying thank you. I've had enough. I've had enough. Just can't do it anymore. If you're here today, again, you're not alone. But I also want to go back. If you're here and you've ever felt like that, you've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to acknowledge it so that we can address it. Because I want to tell you, I want to learn from some of these things that Elijah did and what we can learn and maybe some responses. Because you need to know anxiety and depression will always strike the very first mistake that he made that we often make. It'll always strike, number one, when we run ourselves into the ground. When we run ourselves into the ground. The Bible says, you missed it, Elijah went to Beersheba, a town in Judah. If you know anything about the geography of where he just was before he started making that journey, running from Jezebel, the one person that he's let completely ruin his mental state. If you look at it on a map from where he was to where he wound up in Beersheba, it's about a 100-mile run. So he decides not only the pressure of crying out and building it off, don't you think that he thought, man, what if I cry out to God and he doesn't burn this offering up? Y'all don't think he's normal? Like, what if I cry out and say, God, send it? And like nothing? Just the anxiety, the pressure of always having to perform and feel like people are watching you and always being on this pressure and it's anxiety. And on top of that, he decides that his response, listen, to his anxiety, his response to his mental state was, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to run and I'm going to run until I physically cannot run anymore. 100 miles. It's almost 4 marathons in a row. I remember a few years back, normally, just a little confession about me, normally a full week for me, something that I can reasonably handle without wanting to lose my mind is leading the staff, leading the leadership team here at Heights, and some of the key level leaders, and preparing for the weekend, and everything that our church does for ARC, and coaching with ARC, and prep time, and still trying to be a decent husband and a good dad to 4 small, crazy kids, it's a crazy house and everything. That right there, it may not sound like a lot to you. That's a pretty full week for me. Like if I push that a little bit, stretch that either way, add on a bunch of travel on top of that, and things really get crazy. But I remember a season back in 2017, and if you're new here, we used to meet at an elementary school, and we had an opportunity to get out. We had to be out of the elementary school, and we were in negotiations with on this space right here. Well, we didn't start negotiating on this space. We really started negotiating on about 10 other spaces before this. We had a deadline that we had to be out of Cackley by Easter Sunday. And we knew we couldn't move, so we were trying to get somewhere so our grand opening in our new location could be on Easter Sunday, because that makes sense. We'd have to be able to have energy. We just transition right. And so all of January, February, we were out looking at spaces, negotiating deals. We got close on almost 3 or 4 different things, and God, my goodness, completely spared us from some of the things. I was like, you're not with me. And he was. He just had something better than I thought, like he often does. And we were negotiating, and we found this space. Listen, we found this space 1 month before we had to have our first service in here. 1 month. And actually, if you don't know, this is what this place looked like when we moved in. I'm standing right now somewhere right around, there's that center pole right there. And this was their pharmacy, 2-story pharmacy. Of course, all these things, 0 bathrooms. The bathrooms actually used to be right behind this door. So when we first moved in, anybody right in the middle of an altar call, you'd usually get a good flush. In Jesus' name. And it was awesome. And the team, it wasn't just me. There's a group of, we had, at this time, it wasn't leading it was maybe leading, I think we had 1 or 2 staff, but leading like a team of like 10 high-level, all volunteers, and still preaching on the weekend when we moved into this. And this kicked off, when we signed it and got the key, we had 25 days to get into this building and have our first service, to which many of you are like, do you just have the first service like this? No, of course not. For 25 days, we pulled all-nighters in this building. Every day, every night, shift after shift, lifts, dust mask, paint, scrape, all the stuff that you can think, on top of the things that I was already normally doing, trying to be a good dad, a decent husband. I preached probably 4 or 5 of the worst sermons of my entire life, during this season right here. And just in 25 days, listen, it went from this to, this was our first Sunday that we ever had in this building, was Easter Sunday in 2017. Now listen, I don't show you this so that we can say, wow. I show you this to say, on Easter Sunday of 2017, I had a lot of adrenaline because we were doing that, but I preached with walking pneumonia on Easter. Walking pneumonia. And I had walking pneumonia because I had completely ran myself into the... But listen, it didn't start on Easter Sunday in April. Come on, are you following me? It didn't start in April. I fell apart in April because I ran myself into the ground in March. I got walking pneumonia in April, but that was only because I kept going and I kept going and I kept going. Brandon, hand me one of those underneath your seat. And listen, this is where many of us are in our life. You want to know why you can't get any relief from the anxiety, from the depression, from it just keeps going, and your life is like this. And there's only so much pressure and bend that your life can take. But when you do not stop, when you keep going and you keep going, see, you can go right there and nothing will happen. You can go back if you'll take a pause. But when you keep running and you keep running and you keep applying and you keep going, no, it's only... Nice catch. And this is what many of our lives look like. Because we simply won't stop. So what do we do? What do we do? I've been there. I can say it. I literally ran myself. I fell apart, but it didn't start with the falling apart. It started because I ran myself into the ground a month earlier. So what do? Here's the action. I'm just going to give you some steps. Stop and rest. Hey, listen. It's okay to stop and rest. Not only is it okay, you have to stop and rest. Just because it's doable doesn't mean it's sustainable. You have to really look at some things that you're doing and say, where am I going to look at things that I'm currently doing and say, I don't need to be doing this anymore. I'm going to say, no, I've got to rest. Sabbath, rest. It's spiritual and it's holy and it brings healing and restorative power, listen, to your life when you stop and you rest. Being a workaholic, refusing to rest doesn't make you strong, it makes you stupid. Nobody's going to tell it to you that clearly. It doesn't make you strong, it makes you dumb. Stop and rest. Breathe. Get some sunlight on your face. Take a walk. Stop staring at screens all day. Interact with a human being. Talk. Not use your thumbs. Crazy. What are you talking about? It's just stopping the chaotic pace of every single day life. We run ourselves into the ground. Therefore, we're anxious. Depressed, can't stop. What is the second thing that we see when anxiety strikes that Elijah did that sometimes we do is then we shut people out. We shut people out. We run ourselves into the ground, and because of that we start to shut people out. Remember what Elijah did? It said that he left his servant. He went on by himself. I don't know about you, I've been here. I'm constantly battling this. Because I'm guarding the pastor mystique. You guys do this just in different ways. I can't let anybody know that I'm gonna go tell somebody and say, yes! I got this though, I'm strong enough, I can do this, I don't need anybody, I'll figure it out on my own. And the reason why we start to shut people out is because people are probably the majority of the reason why I'm experiencing the pain that I'm experiencing. And because people are responsible for the pain, what we'll do is we would rather feel nothing than feel the pain that we're currently feeling. So then we withdraw and we disconnect from everybody around us. And when you withdraw and you begin to shut people out, listen, you become emotionally numb. And if you're not careful, listen to me, it doesn't start with physical suicide. It always starts with emotional suicide. The physical is just the carrying out of the act that's already taken place on the inside, that I'm dead, I cannot feel anything, I cannot love anything, the thing that used to bring me in, it doesn't, and you're just emotionally numb. And because you're numb and you've shut people out and you don't want to address it because you can't talk about it, all you do is fill up your schedule and busy yourself, and put more things on your plate, doing everything you can to mask who you really are. We shut people out. We need things to distract us, to keep us from focusing on the fact that we're emotionally numb. This is why I love our small groups. This is why I love the fact that even though our church is very large on Sunday morning, while we have to be even bigger on Sunday morning, but we also have to grow small during the week. We have to have relationships. You have to have some people in your life. We always say we're better together. Come on, every voice. We're better. Together. We're better. And listen, you have to have the better in your life. You have to have somebody in your life. So let me tell you, what do you want me to do, Josh? What's my next step if you're here? Maybe it's you need to stop and rest. For others of you, you need to do this one. You need to start pursuing accountability. Listen, pursue accountability. Let me say, accountability after a crisis is not accountability. Some of you aren't following me. Accountability after the crisis has already happened is not accountability. No, but I called and I told him after. Yeah, that's not accountability. That's called confession. And you need both, by the way. You need both. Accountability is the person that you have in your life that is a 911. Hey, I'm about to do something stupid. I'm about to get in this car. I'm about to send this text. I'm about to let this person know how I really feel. I'm about to do something done. Would you please talk some sense into me? That's accountability. Listen, make the call before so you don't have to make it after. And you've got to pursue these things. They're not going to come next. You've got to chase after accountability. Let me ask you a question. Who are you accountable to? That in your darkest moment, when you're about to take too many pills, when you're about to smoke that, drink that, say that, touch that, do that, who do you have in your life that you can call beforehand and say, hey, I need you to come over right now? What are you talking about? I'm talking about intentional relationships, pursuing accountability so that I don't have to walk through maybe a crisis. He went on alone, and we do the same. That's why you got to find your team, get on it. Who are you accountable to? The third thing that we see Elijah do is, it always happens too when we focus on the negative. We focus on the negative. Remember what he said? I've had. Come on, you've been there. You maybe not be able to. Just want to scream. I've had enough. He said, I'm no better than my ancestors. I'm telling you, you want to stay in a state of depression, anxiety, stress, mental. It's called the physical, the medical term is called ruminating. Where you have one thought, you can't get rid of it, so what do? Ruminate over and over and over again. Oh, what? I'll never have this. I'll never get that promotion. My job will never change. Oh, I guess my marriage will never change. I guess my life will always be like this. I'll never move here. I'll never get married. I'll never get pregnant. I'll never have this. I'll never have that house that I dreamed of. I'll never. And without every single time you say, I'll never, the only reason why you're saying never is because you're seeing somebody else who has. And without even realizing it, we start comparing ourselves to everybody else around you. Listen to me. When you are going through your darkest, deepest, anxious thoughts, can I just encourage you this morning that here's what I want you to do. The next is just focus on the good. Even if it's one thing. Pastor Josh, I don't have one good thing in my life. That's the problem. Yes, you do. Next time you're thinking about the all-nevers and what if this happens, why don't you just tell yourself, God, thank you for your goodness. Lord, thank you for your mercy. Lord, if there's nothing else, God, that you do, you've already done enough for me. I'm just going to remind myself how good God is. I'm going to remind myself. You know what? I'm focusing on the good nope, go back. I'm reminding myself, listen, that I'm just walking through the valley of the shadow of death. I'm not living in the valley of the shadow of death. Thank you, God, that I could live there. I could lie down with the wicked, Lord, but thank you that you're causing me to just pass through, that these temporary problems, that this temporary pain, Lord, it's just temporary, Lord, and there's going to be, Lord, you're going to save me, you're going to redeem me. Come on, and you just focus on the good. Focus on the good. Focus on the good. Instead of focus on the negative, we're going to find one thing, just one. And you can find one. It doesn't matter what your situation is to focus on. Then the last thing we see, Tim, help me close, and last thing that we see, anxiety will always hit, pressure will always mount. Depression is coming your way when you forget God. When you forget God. Isn't it amazing that Elijah's life marked by just God's presence and power? And I mean, 2 chapters before 18, where we see him call fire from, literally, he was with a woman and the boy died. And Elijah raised the boy from death he brought him back from the dead. This is crazy stuff. I mean, over time and again, Elijah's seen the hand of God move in his life. And still struggles, still finds himself doing what so many of us do. I know that I do. Facing your problems while forgetting your God. Struggling, fighting. I know God's real. I think he's up there, but what in the world? God, I've seen you move the mountains. God, I've seen you provide. I've seen you heal. I've seen you restore. I've seen you do miracle after miracle after miracle. But for some reason, when I'm faced with the pain, I can't see your promise. If we're not careful, we begin to forget who our God is. So what do? This is action step. Next step for all of us, by the way, is you got to experience the presence and the power of God. You know what I love about our God is how God responded to Elijah's mental state. Because if I was God and I'd have done all of that for you over and over, and you still, literally, I could hear God. You would expect God to be like, are you serious? Depressed? You're anxious? Again? Like, get with it. People are watching you. Set a good example. I'm not going to write about you in the Bible acting like this. You're supposed to be the man. Toughen up. Is that how God responded? No. So I want you to watch how the story ends. Elijah, depressed, anxious, living in fear, running for his life. This is what the Bible says. The Lord told Elijah, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord. Why? Because I'm about to do something. I'm about to show up. The next verse says, then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came this big fire, all this spectacle, all this stuff, but the Lord wasn't in the fire. And after the fire came a what? A gentle whisper. I want to invite my beautiful wife, Crystal. Would you come up here and help me close this service? Y'all give it up for my beautiful wife, Crystal. Earth, wind, fire. It's a little old school reference for all my people. Do you remember? Oh, so sorry. No. But the Lord wasn't in any of those. The Lord was in He was going to whisper. You got to get this as we close. I'm telling you, this is so powerful in my office. Just sitting there. And I began to think, why wasn't God in the big, in the remarkable, in the loud, in the earthquake, in the fire, and all these spectacles? Why wasn't God in this? Why doesn't God shout? Why doesn't God? Because you know who shouts? Satan shouts. Satan screams. You're never going to be enough. You're never going to be whole. You're always going to deal with that depression. You're always going to have to take that medication. You're never going to be free. You're never going to experience anything different in your relationships. You're always going to be just, see, Satan shouts, Satan yells, but God doesn't yell. He what? Now, why does he whisper? Listen, why does he whisper? Satan has to shout because he's far away. God whispers because he's close. He's close. And some of you listen, you're anxious. And you're scared. And you're depressed. And God's not over here yelling, going, hey, and you're looking for the big, and you're looking for this big breakthrough, but you just need to know. He says, I'm right here. I'm close. And I know you're scared, but I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to forsake you. My grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in your weakness. Yea, though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you will not fear. My rod and my staff, they comfort you. I know you're going to walk through the waters, but they're not going to overcome. You're going to walk through the fire, but you're not going to be burned. I'm with you. I'm with you. Listen, our God. You're looking. Some of you want to be healed. I want to be healed. God, where's the big miracle? Where's my big breakthrough? You want to know what your breakthrough is? Are you ready? Maybe show them this verse. Put it up. Put up this verse. I'm going to pray. Be still. Be. Heights Church, come on. This is the word of the Lord over you right now. Be still. Why? So you can hear. I love you. I'm your strength. I'm your source. I'm your peace. I'm your healer. I'm all that you need. My name is Emmanuel, God with you, Jehovah, Yahweh. I'm Elohim. I'm the mighty one. I'm the lifter of your head. I'm your encourager. I'm your defender. I am your solid rock. I am your shield. And you begin to hear his voice. And what begins to happen is where fear and worry ruled, all of a sudden strength and faith begins to build you up. Our God is here. He's near. That's what his name means. And he's here right now. Bow your heads.